What's up, guys? Lots to talk about. It was a busy morning. So it's 9 a.m. here in Sydney, and I woke up to a barrage of messages and this crazy. I went to bed last night knowing what happened, but the details still aren't 100% on possible sort of like the finer details. So what I will do is start this. We have a lot of things to cover. If you're joining here at the beginning, we're going to talk about BoMac being arrested. We're going to talk about the UK gun laws, specifically at airports, potential sentencing, and then also we're going to cover Canelo Alvarez. He made some comments today about Bud Crawford and just kind of Crawford's resume, that sort of thing. It could get tiresome when we're talking about fighters and shit talking back and forth about resumes, but when it comes from a guy like Canelo Alvarez who has a huge fight at the end of the month, it just kind of, for me at least, seemed a bit out of left field. We'll get to that in the end, but I want to talk about Sky Sports is, I trust them better than Boxing Scene. I'll trust Sky Sports better than Boxing News 24/7. But for all those aren't in the know, we'll cover this story. SkySports.com, their headline, it says, Chris Eubank Jr.'s trainer BoMac arrested and charged following arrest in Manchester. So we know that, right? And here's what it says. The Greater Manchester Police confirmed to Sky Sports News in a statement the 53-year-old had been charged following his arrest at Manchester Airport. So he wasn't just arrested and let go. He was charged, which changes the whole game. And we'll get into that. With charges come court, and with court comes sentencing. We'll cover that in a second. At around 10:45 a.m. on Sunday, September 3rd, 2023, officers were called to reports of a possible firearm being found in hold luggage by airport staff at the Manchester airport. The statement from the Greater Manchester Police read, after initial inspection by security, officers attended and the firearm was seized on his person. Subsequently, the 53-year-old man was arrested for possession of a firearm and was taken into custody for further questioning. Brian McIntyre from the U.S. was charged with possession of a firearm and possession of ammunition for a firearm without a certificate. He attended Stockport Magistrates Court this morning where he was further remanded into custody. He is next due to appear at Manchester Crown Court on Monday, October 9th, 2023. Guys, it's September 5th here in Sydney. So that is over 4 weeks from now. This American boxing coach is being held in an international prison because he chose to travel internationally, not only with a gun on his person, meaning in his luggage, but it was loaded. And we'll talk about the reasons why in a second. Let's finish this. The alarm was raised when UK Border Force intercepted baggage after a scan allegedly showed a weapon along with a magazine and ammunition contained within it. Sky Sports News has been told armed police then descended upon the departure lounge at Manchester Airport's Terminal 2 to arrest McIntyre. BoMac had been in the corner of Eubank Jr. for a stoppage victory in a rematch against Liam Smith at Manchester Arena on Saturday night. The trainer also works with undisputed welterweight world champ Terence Crawford. Eubank Jr.'s team has not commented at this stage. This is a developing story. So there's a few things to talk about before we get into the charges, before we get into the potential sentencing, is the mindset. I was on a run earlier this morning with a client of mine, and I was talking to him about this, just about, I was telling him the story and how BoMac, being an American, we all know about the gun laws in America. Down here, I was raised in America. Down here in Australia, no guns. They were banned in the 90s. The UK, no guns. And so the reason why we preference this is that we know BoMac's a busy guy. He's, still, traveling from state to state. I know there's certain states in America that have open carry policies, but I initially thought that this guy was just busy, so he's flying from city to city. Maybe his schedule's so busy he doesn't even know where he's at. He packs his bags. He goes to the UK, one fight to the next, and he just doesn't know it's there. But when they said that it was found on him, it was on his carry-on, that means that he knew it was there. He knew it was loaded, and then he had ammunition. Okay, now what's the psychology behind that guy? My client this morning during our run, He knows nothing about boxing. He doesn't pretend to. And all he knew about the case was what I told him. Sometimes, guys, these are the best buffers to get an outsider's perspective on a breaking situation, is to ask somebody who's not involved so much with whatever we're talking about. In this case, my client knows nothing about boxing. He's a bright guy, and he was talking about the psychology of the man who travels internationally with the gun loaded on his person. And he said from his perspective, it sounds like a guy who doesn't get said no to a lot. He said it sounds like a man with an ego in a sense that he could just get away with anything. And then he said it also sounds like a guy who doesn't really respect authority to a sense of thinking that there will be consequences. All of that is from a client of mine who knows nothing about the sport, and all he knew about the situation was what I read to him that I just read to you. Now, that being said, I want to ask you guys, this is why we're here. I respect your opinion. If I told you guys how many times I maneuvered through certain content that I've created based on your recommendations, I think you'd be, I tip my hat to you. I listen to you guys. What do you think was going on here? Do you think that BoMac was just a tired old coach who forgot he had it on him? Do you think that his mindset was like, look, I'm traveling, I'm BoMac. If someone tries to pop off on me, I'm gonna be ready for it. I don't care about international law. We know where he comes from. Boxing's a tough sport. Boxing's a brutal sport, both in and out, the politics of it, and the psychology of the man who we know about his boxing background. He was a fighter. He comes from Nebraska. It's literally the same streets that Bud Crawford comes from. We know it's a rough part of the world. Are any of those excuses? Because what we're about to get into, the sentencing, the legality of it, is pretty confronting. I had to double check because last night when I posted on the Facebook group and the community section here about the story, people were commenting that in the UK, you get a year per bullet. That's not including the additional charges of just having the loaded gun. So I was like, it can't be that stringent, is it? This guy had a loaded gun on him in an airport. Charges plus the bullets. So I was like, what is he facing? They're holding him. It's not like, hey, you had a gun, sign this, come back in 5 weeks, go about your normal life in America, and then just make sure you fly back to the UK for this court. No, he's in a jail cell. Raise your hand if you've ever been in a jail cell. My hand's not raised. Raise your hand if you've ever been arrested. My hand is not raised. My biggest fear as a young kid growing up born in the early 80s in America, my two biggest fears as a young kid, and don't laugh at me when I say this, one was getting HIV and dying of AIDS. I'm 8 years old. That was my biggest fear. Two was getting charged and accused of something I didn't do and spending the rest of my life in jail. Those two things, we won't talk about. The sexual one in nature made me super sort of like critical of who my intimate partners were over my younger years. And the second one just made me super disciplined and respectful around authority when it comes to cops. So never been to jail, never been arrested. I can only imagine. I've also never been a world champion boxing coach who is at the top of the list for every pundit's boxing coach of the year, boxing trainer of the year award. I've never been that either. So we weigh that, and then you take that guy and you put him in jail. 24 hours after the highs from the victory with Eubank Jr. And then you weigh all that in and you remove that, and now you put that man in jail in a different country. Man, we can only imagine what's going through his head right now. Here's some of the laws. I Googled, what is the minimum sentence for a gun in the UK? For example, the minimum prison sentence for firearm offenses is 5 years for an adult and 3 years for a 16 or 17-year-old. That's the minimum for a gun. Think about those. Think about you Americans, if those were the laws in America. You get caught with a gun, you get 5 years determinate sentencing. The maximum prison sentence for firearm offenses is typically, you ready for this? 10 years. But if other crimes are involved, then it could be life imprisonment. This is just crazy, guys. This is crazy. I'm going to Google, what is the penalty for carrying a gun in a UK airport? In the UK, it is an offense to possess a firearm with intent to endanger life. okay, they're not going to be able to improve. They're not going to be able to prove intent. BoMac didn't go there trying to endanger life. You know, we'd like to think, I mean, I've seen him do a lot of interviews. He seems like a sweetheart who's just rough around the edges. So you got to think he was protecting himself. So let's remove to the intent to endanger life. Let's not be that emotional about it. That, though, would carry a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. It also is an offense to carry a firearm with intent to commit an offense or resisting arrest. Now, let's see these bullets. I couldn't find anything specifically about getting caught with bullets because that's another thing. I remember back in the day in the early 90s, one of my favorite stand-up comedy hours was Chris Rock. I think it was the Bigger and Blacker, the hour he did where he talked about people would think a lot more about shooting somebody if you made the bullets X amount of money. He was like, charge $1 million a bullet, and people would think twice about who they're going to shoot up. So when I heard that the UK had a law about increased prison sentences with the gun due to how many bullets, I was like, that sounds crazy to me. But then again, I was raised in America. All right, here we go. Guide on firearms. What is the minimum sentence? New sentencing guidelines for firearms. Arrested. Let's see, UK gun laws, airport sentencing. Let's see what that says. Guide on firearms licensing law. Persons. Okay, here we go. We'll cover this. So this is from a government website called Assets Publishing Service Government.uk. Guide on firearms licensing law. If any of you guys want me to post this in the community section on the photos, I'll do that. Or actually, I'll put it in the comments here if you're interested, if you're a nerd like myself. So this is from the UK, copyright 2023. So it's new law. And let's see what they're going to talk about. An overview for you. What is it meant by the term firearm? Yeah, firearm is a barreled weapon. What are the basic principles in Great Britain? They're banned no matter what. You can't. Gun ownership is a privilege, not a right. Firearms control is among the toughest. Okay, so let's stop there before I bored you to death. I just learned that the firearms committee and the way you could carry is the toughest in the world in terms of laws and sentencing. The UK, the United Kingdom, which is Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and England. So, and if I miss one, my UK friends, tear me up in the comments. I think I got that right, though. Ireland, too, if I didn't say that. The toughest in the world. And this guy just marches on in there and just gets caught with it. It's crazy. So comment below. I'm interested what you guys think. Do you think it was a dumb mistake? Do you think it was his ego? Do you think he didn't know? Do you think that... And I don't even want to say this one because this is what you guys are going to say. Do you think he was set up? And I'm going to move on. All right. We covered BoMac. I want to now cover, if you guys bear with me, the Canelo Alvarez comments because we talked about it. I did a video earlier this morning about how Canelo was on an interview stating that Bud Crawford's resume is a joke. And it's like in that moment, it was a TMZ interview, and I saw the headline. I thought TMZ was trolling a bit, and I heard him say it, and it almost seemed contrived. It almost seemed like, in a way, I think, for Canelo to badmouth Crawford 4 weeks out from the Charlo fight about not a skill set, because, you know, Canelo plays the mid-fence. Crawford's a great fighter. Crawford's performance against Errol was amazing. I have a lot of respect for Crawford, but he never fought anyone. But he only has one good victory. But he hasn't proved himself. And it's like a dude like Canelo, who's been in the game since 2005, fought in 5 different divisions, one of the best of all time. I would think a guy like Alvarez would carry himself a bit differently in terms of what even if he felt that way, for him to say that on international media was kind of interesting to me. So, to psychoanalyze the comments, I was thinking, is Canelo posturing up, win or lose with the fight with Bud? And that's what I think, because don't sleep on Reynoso. Don't sleep on Eddie. You know, that there's some brains in that Canelo camp. And so, everybody knows that Crawford is sort of bloodthirsty for undisputed. That's all he wants. He wants big fights. Canelo wants big fights. What if Canelo is saying that to just keep Bud in mind? Does he not really mean that? Because, like, Canelo loses, Crawford's fighting Charlo at 68. Canelo wins, Crawford wants the Canelo fight at 68. Because that fight is happening at the end of September in another 4 weeks, and Errol Spence announced he wants to activate the rematch clause. It's already been July 29th, 4 weeks. It's going into the 5th week since the fight with EJ. And something no one's talking about is EJ got his ass beat, but he didn't go out. He wasn't comatose. There's a big difference in terms of recovery. If you look at the UFC, for instance, after the fight, when the board committee rules come out about potential suspensions for health, it is much higher if a fighter gets knocked out cold. They take that into consideration in terms of recovery, how much time a fighter would need versus just a TKO stoppage on your feet, right? So that in itself, in my head, tells me that the way this would line up, chronologically, is that Errol didn't go out. He didn't go unconscious. He got his ass beat. Let's not get it twisted. But he didn't go out. That means that I don't think he would need more than 12 weeks. Everyone's like, oh, he should take time off. Stephen A. Smith, who doesn't know shit about boxing, that's the one guy we'll talk shit about, Stephen A. Smith, this guy, says that Errol should wait to the end of the year. Why? Why would he wait to the end of the year? I like the surprise attack. If Errol signs, it's already been 4 weeks. Give him another 8 weeks. That puts us at September, October. I mean, could you imagine December or New Year's Eve in Las Vegas? Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Bud Crawford, 2. That then, no matter how it plays out with Charlo and Canelo, September 29th, that then would lead to, I mean, if EJ let's say Crawford beats Errol, a 2024 with either Canelo and Charlo versus Crawford. And I think that's what these movements are lining up for. And I think that is why Canelo is keeping Terrence in his mouth, because who's the biggest fighter in the world right now? Terrence Crawford. Who has the most money? I mean, you put a Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Crawford. I mean, I don't care what you guys say about weight classes. That's the fight I want to see too. I can't wait to see Errol Spence the rematch though, because playing sports my whole life, being around boxing my whole life, you never know what's going to happen. And he didn't get out. He didn't get knocked out cold. There's a rematch clause. The kid had never lost. He feels like he had more dog in him. He's been a winner his whole goddamn life on every level. And he's come back he lost in the amateurs before and come back and won. We're gonna see a different side of him, and I'm watching it. I don't care what you guys say. And I'm a Bud fan. I'm an EJ fan, so I'm coming at it from a neutral perspective. And I'll leave you guys with this: the most scared I've ever been in America. In 2016, I was living in Sydney. I go to America to do this podcast tour. It was my first show called The Vision Board. We're flying from LA to New York to Austin. We get to Austin. One of these Border Patrol agents pulls me off to the side, and he takes me to the x-ray machine with my carry-on luggage. And he goes, "What the hell's that thing?" I go, "What?" And it looks like, in my bag, it looks like a fucking bullet. And he goes, "If we fucking open your bag and that's a bullet, that's a federal offense." I was like, dude, I don't have guns. It's not a bullet. I was so scared by the police officer and the Border Patrol guys convincing me I had a bullet that I did something wrong. Here's what it was. It was this. It was a cord to my podcast microphone. So, in lieu of what's happening with BoMac, everything with he's in jail now. I don't wish jail upon nobody. I can only imagine what he's going through. I got scared for having that. Could you imagine if he forgot that he had his burner with him and it was loaded, what he's feeling? All in all, guys, we're going to end it on that. Stay tuned. Like, subscribe, share, put the notifications on. As you can tell, I put a lot of content out, and I appreciate you guys for helping me grow over the last year. So anything you guys want to hear, let me know.